remind you of the title of tonight's event, Life and or Death, a Classic Case. A return to the place of origin of what we all take for granted, our questioning minds. At the same time, a study of some performative modes in addressing burning issues and critical audiences. May I also remind you of fire exit. One there, one there, one there. The gathering point in case of difficult situation is out there. We are in the first year of the 95th Olympiad of antiquity, the year 399 before Christ for us. The men of Athens have assembled to deal once and for all with one of their fellow citizens, a well-known but troublesome individual. 500 of them, the jury, are sitting in judgment of him. They have already heard the speeches of the three prosecutors, Lycon, Anytus, and Meletus, and will now listen to the address of the accused in defense of himself. His name is Socrates.
What effect my accusers have had upon you, gentlemen, I do not know. But for my own part, I was almost carried away by them. Their arguments were so convincing. On the other hand, scarcely a word what they say was true. I was especially astonished at one of their many misrepresentations, the point where they told you that you must be careful not to let me deceive you, implying that I am a skillful speaker. I thought that it was particularly brazen of them to have the nerve to tell you this, only moments before events must show them that I have not the slightest skill as a speaker, unless, of course, by a skillful speaker, they mean one who speaks the truth. If that is what they mean, I would agree that I am an orator, and quite out of their class. From me, gentlemen, you shall hear the whole truth. Not, I can assure you, in flowery language like theirs. No, what you will hear will be improvised thoughts as they occur to me. This is my first appearance in a court of law at the age of 70. I am a complete stranger to the language of this place. So I make this request of you to disregard the manner of my speech and to concentrate upon this one question, whether my claims are just or not. That is the first duty of a juryman, and the pleader's duty is to speak the truth. The proper course for me, gentlemen of the jury, is to deal first with the earliest charges that have been falsely brought against me and with my earliest accusers. I mean the people who took hold of so many of you when you were children and tried to fill your minds with untrue accusations against my character, saying, there is a clever man called Socrates who is committing an injustice, and that he inquires into things below the earth and in the sky, and makes the weaker argument defeat the stronger, and teaches others to follow his example. runs something like this. It is these people, gentlemen, the disseminators of these rumors, who are my dangerous accusers, because it is impossible to bring them here for cross-examination. One simply has to conduct one's defense and argue one's case against an invisible opponent. It is impossible for me even to know and tell you their names, unless one of them happens to be a playwright. You have seen it for yourselves in the play by Aristotle, where Socrates is lifted around proclaiming that he is walking on air and uttering a great deal of other nonsense about things of which I know nothing whatsoever. I mean no disrespect for such knowledge, if anyone really is versed in it. But the fact is, gentlemen, that I take no interest in these things. And if you have heard anyone say that I try to educate people and charge a fee, there's no truth in that either. Though I think that it is a fine thing if a man has the ability to teach. I should certainly become a proud and gentlemanly figure if I understood these things. But in fact, gentlemen, I do not.
But what is it that you do, Socrates? How is it that you have been misrepresented like this? Surely all this talk and gossip about you would never have arisen if you had confined yourself to ordinary activities, but only if your behavior was abnormal. Give us the explanation, if you do not want us to draw our own conclusion.
This seems to me to be a reasonable try to explain to you what it is that has given me this false notoriety. I have gained this reputation, gentlemen, from nothing more or less than a kind of wisdom. What kind of wisdom do I mean? Human wisdom, I suppose. It seems that I really am wise in this limited sense. Now, gentlemen, please do not interrupt me, even if I seem to make an extravagant claim, for what I'm going to tell you is not a tale of my own. I am going to refer you to an unimpeachable authority. I shall call as witness to my wisdom, such as it is, the god at Delphi. You know Chaerephon, I presume. He was a friend of mine since boyhood. He was Democrat, by the way. And you know what he was like. How enthusiastic he was over anything he had once undertaken. Well, one day he actually went to Delphi and asked this question of the god. As I said before, please, gentlemen, don't interrupt me. What he asked was whether there was anyone wiser than myself. And the Parthian priestess replied, no, there was no one. As Chaerephon is dead, the evidence for my statement will be supplied by his brother there. When I heard about the oracle's answer, I said to myself, what is the god saying? And what is his hidden meaning? I am only too conscious that I have no claim to wisdom, great or small. So what can he mean by asserting that I am the wisest man in the world? He cannot be telling a lie. That would not be right for him. So, after puzzling about it for some time, I set myself at last, and with considerable reluctance, to check the truth of it in the following way. I went to interview a man with a high reputation for wisdom, because I felt that here, if anywhere, I should succeed in disproving the oracle and pointing out to my divine authority, here is a man who is wiser than I am. Well, I gave a thorough examination to this person. I need not mention his name. He was one of our politicians. And I formed the impression that although in many people's opinion, and especially in his own, he appeared to be wise, but in fact he was not. And then when I tried to show him that he only thought he was wise and was not really so, my efforts were resented by him and by many of the other people present. However, I reflected as I walked away, well, I am certainly wiser than this man. It is only too likely that neither of us has any knowledge to boast of. But he thinks that he knows something which he does not know, whereas I am quite conscious of my ignorance. At any rate, it seems that I am wiser than he is to this small extent, that I do not think that I know what I don't know. From that time on, I interviewed one person after another, and I realized with distress and alarm that I was making myself unpopular. But I felt compelled to put the God's business first. Since I was trying to find out the meaning of the oracle, I was bound to interview everyone who had a reputation for knowledge. And by dog, gentlemen, my honest impression was thus. It seemed to me that the people with the greatest reputation were almost entirely deficient, while others who were supposed to be their inferiors were more noteworthy for their general good sense. The truth of the matter, gentlemen, is likely to be this, that real wisdom is the property of the God. And this oracle is his way of telling us that human wisdom has little or no value. It seems to me that he is not referring literally to Socrates, but has merely taken my name as an example, as if he would say to us, the wisest of you men is he who has realized, like Socrates, that in respect of wisdom he is really worthless. And that is why I still go about seeking and searching in obedience to the divine command. This occupation has kept me too busy to do much other in politics or in my own affairs. In fact, my service to the God has reduced me to extreme poverty. Furthermore, young men have, of their own accord, attached themselves to me because they enjoy hearing other people cross-question. And they often take me as their model and go on to question other persons, whereupon their victims become annoyed, not with themselves, but with me. And they complain that there is a pestilential busybody called Socrates who fills young people's heads with wrong ideas. So much for my defense against the charges brought by the anonymous group of my accusers. I shall now try to defend myself against Miletus. high-principled and patriotic as it seems to be. Let us first consider the affidavit. It runs like this. Socrates is guilty of corrupting the minds of the young and of believing in supernatural matters of his own invention, instead of the gods recognized by the state. Such was the charge. Let us examine its points one by one. It claims that I am guilty of corrupting the young. But I say, gentlemen, that Meletus is guilty of treating a serious matter with frivolity and professes concern in matters to which he has never given the slightest attention. I will try to prove to your satisfaction. Come, Meletus, tell me this. You regard it as supremely important, do you not, that our young people should be exposed to the best possible influence?
I do.
Very well. Tell these gentlemen who it is that influences the young for the better. Obviously, you must know if you paid so much attention. You have discovered the vicious influence, as you say, in myself. And you are now prosecuting me before these gentlemen. Speak up and inform them who it is that has a good influence upon the young. Tell me, my friend, who is it that makes the young good?
The laws.
That is not what I mean, my dear sir. I am asking you to name the first. The first business, of course, is to know the laws.
These gentlemen here, Socrates, the members of the jury.
Oh, you mean, Meletus, that they have the ability to educate the young and to make them better?
Certainly.
Does this apply to all jurymen?
To all of them.
Or to some? Oh, excellent. A generous supply of benefactors. Well then, do these spectators who are present in court, do they have an improving influence or not?
Yes, they do.
But surely, Meletus, all those members of the assembly do not corrupt the young, or do they too exert an improving influence?
Yes, they do.
And it would seem that the whole population of Athens has a refining effect upon the young, except myself. And I alone corrupt. Is that your meaning?
Most emphatically, yes.
Great misfortune indeed you have dealt. Well, let me put another question to you. Take the case of horses. Do you believe that those who improve them make up the whole of mankind? And that there is only one person who has a bad effect on them? Or is the truth not just the opposite? That the ability to improve them belongs to one person, or to very few persons, who are horse trainers, whereas most people do them harm? Is not this the case, Meletus, both with horses and with all other animals? And wouldn't it be a singular dispensation of good fortune for our young people if there were only one person who corrupted them, while all the rest had a beneficial effect? I invite you to tell us, Meletus, in what sense you make out that I corrupt the minds of the young. Surely the terms of your indictment make it clear that you accuse me of teaching them to believe in a new deity instead of the God recognized by the state. Isn't that which has this
demoralize my faith.
That is what I maintain.
Well, then I appeal to you, Miletus, to explain yourself a little more clearly, because I cannot make out what your point is. Is it that I teach people to believe in some gods, but in different gods from those recognized by the state, so that your accusation rests upon the fact that they are different, which would imply that I'm not an atheist? Or do you assert that I believe in no gods at all and teach others to do the same?
No, not at all. Not in the slightest degree.
You are not at all convincing, Miletus. Not even to yourself, I suspect. I ask you to examine with me, gentlemen, the line of reasoning which leads me to this conclusion. You, Miletus, will please answer my question. Is there anyone in the world, Miletus, who believes in human matters and not in human beings? Make him answer, gentlemen. Is there anyone who does not believe in horses but believes in equine matters? No, there is not, my worthy friend. If you do not want to give an answer, I will supply it with. But the next question you must answer. Is there anyone who believes in supernatural matters and not in supernatural beings?
No.
How good of you to give a bare answer under compulsion of the court. Well, do you not assert that I believe and teach others to believe in supernatural matters? It does not matter whether they are new or old. The fact remains that I believe in them, according to your own affidavit. It's not that so. It is. I assume your assent, since you don't say no. As a matter of fact, gentlemen, I do not feel that it requires much more defense to clear myself of Miletus' accusations. What I have said should be already enough.
But do you feel no remorse, Socrates, at having pursued an activity which puts you now in danger of the death penalty?
You are mistaken, my friend. If you think that a man who is worth anything ought to spend his time weighing up the prospects of life and death, he has only one thing to consider in performing any action. That is, whether he is acting justly or unjustly, like a good man or a bad one. Where a man has once taken up his stand, either because it seems best to himself or in obedience to his orders, there I believe he is bound to remain and face the danger, taking no account of death or anything else before dishonor. This being so, it would be shocking inconsistency on my part, gentlemen, if when the officers whom you choose as my commanders assigned me my positions at Potidea and Amphipolis and Delium, I remained at my post like anyone else and faced death. And yet afterwards, when the God appointed me to the duty of leading the philosophic life, examining myself and others, I were then, through fear of death, to desert my post. That would indeed be shocking. And then I might really, with justice, be summoned to court for not believing in the gods, and disobeying the oracle, and being afraid of death, and thinking that I'm wise when I am not.
Okay. Suppose now we acquit you, but only on one condition, that you give up spending your time on this quest and stop philosophizing. If we catch you going on with same way. You shall be put to death.
Well, gentlemen, I am your grateful and devoted servant. But I owe a greater obedience to the God than to you. And as long as I draw breath and have my faculty, I will never stop practicing philosophy. And talking to you critically and pointing out the truth to everyone I meet. I shall go on saying in my usual way, my very good friend, you are an Athenian. You belong to a city that is the greatest and most famous in the world for its wisdom and strength. Are you not ashamed that you give your attention to acquiring as much money as possible, and likewise with reputation and honor, and give no attention or thought to truth and understanding and the perfection of your soul? And if any one of you disputes this and professes to care about these things, I shall not at once let him go. No, I shall question him and examine him and put him to the test. Now, if it appears that, in spite of his claims, he has made no real progress towards goodness, I shall reprove him for neglecting what is of supreme importance and giving his attention to trivialities. I shall do this to everyone that I meet, young or old, foreigner or fellow citizen, but especially to you, my fellow citizens, inasmuch as you are closer to me in kinship. To put it bluntly, God has assigned me to this city as if to a large thoroughbred horse, which, because of its great size, is inclined to be lazy and needs the stimulation of some stinging fly. It seems to me that the God has attached me to this city to do the office of such a fly. And all day long man never ceases to settle here and there and everywhere, rousing and persuading and reproving every one of you. You will not easily find another one like me. And if you would take my advice, you'll spare my life. Perhaps before long you will awake from your drowsing. Then, in your annoyance, you will finish me off. Thoughtlessly. What a scene of sin. And then you can go on sleeping till the end of your days. It may seem curious that I should go around giving advice, busying myself in people's private affairs, and yet never venture publicly to address you as a whole and give advice in matters of state. The reason for this is, gentlemen, that I am subject to a divine or supernatural experience. It began in my early childhood. A sort of voice comes to me. And when it comes, it always dissuades me from what I'm proposing to do and never urges me on. It is this that prevents me from entering public life. And a very good thing it is, too. Because you may be quite sure, gentlemen, that if I tried long ago to engage in politics, I would have long ago lost my life. Please, do not be offended if I tell you the truth. No man on earth who conscientiously opposes you or any other organized democracy and flatly prevents a great many wrongs and illegalities of taking place can possibly survive with his life. The true champion of justice, if he intends to survive even for a short time, must necessarily confine himself to private life and leave politics alone. There, gentlemen. Now you have the substance of what I can say in my defense. It may be that some one of you, remembering his own case, will be annoyed that whereas he, in standing his trial on a less serious charge, made pitiful appeals to the jury with floods of tears, and had his infant children produced in court to excite the maximum of sympathy. I, on the contrary, tend to do nothing of the sort, and that although I am facing the utmost danger, why do I not intend to do anything of that sort? Not out of perversity, gentlemen, nor out of contempt. Whether I'm brave or not in the face of death has nothing to do with it. But, gentlemen, I do not think it is just for a man to appeal to the jury or to get himself acquitted by doing so. He ought to inform them of the facts and convince them by argument. The jury does not sit to dispense justice as a favor, but to decide where justice lies. And the oath they have sworn is not to show favor, but to return a just and lawful verdict. Surely it is obvious that if I tried to persuade you to go against your solemn oath, I would be teaching you contempt for religion. And by my very defense, I would be virtually accusing myself of having no religious belief. But that is very far from the truth, gentlemen. I have a more sincere belief than any of my accusers. And I leave it to you and to God to judge me in whatever way shall be best for me and for yourselves.
The vote of the jury is a tight one, as in so many polls in democracies. Socrates is found guilty by a narrow margin. His accusers had done their homework and had assessed the public mood correctly. At this point in their history, it seems, the majority of Athenians want to get rid of their stinging fly by whatever means. The death penalty, though, which Meletus demands, is not the only option. The accused is entitled to propose an alternative punishment. Will Socrates come up with a solution for the city's moral dilemma? One that is acceptable to all involved, not least to himself?
There are a great many reasons, gentlemen, why I'm not distressed at this result. The chief reason is that it was not unexpected. What does surprise me is the number of votes cast on the two sides. I should never have believed that it would be such a close thing, but now it seems that a mere 30 votes would have made the difference. And I would have been acquitted. However, we must face the fact that this demands the death. Very good. What alternative penalty shall I propose to you?
Obviously, it must be what's deserved. Now, what penalty have I deserved to pay or to suffer in view of what I have done? I never lived an ordinary, quiet life. I didn't care for the things most people care about, making money, having a comfortable home, high military or civil rank, and all the other activities, party organizations, secret societies, political appointments, all these things that are going on in our city. I thought that I was really too fair-minded to survive if I went in for that kind of thing. So I set myself instead to do you individually, private, what I hold to be the greatest possible service. I try to convince every one of you not to think more of practical advantages, but of his mental and moral well-being. So what have I deserved for behaving that way? Some reward, gentlemen, if I'm bound to say that I really deserve. And what is more, a reward that would be appropriate for myself. Now, what would be appropriate for a poor man who is a public benefactor and who requires leisure for the purpose of giving you moral encouragement? Nothing could be more appropriate for such a person than free dining in the Prytaneo. He deserves it much more than any of the victors in the races at Olympia. These people give you the semblance of happiness, but I give you the real thing. I don't need maintenance, but I do. So, if I'm supposed to say, give you an appropriate penalty that would be strictly in accordance with justice, I suggest free maintenance by the state. Or should I suggest banishment? You would very likely accept this suggestion. I should have to be desperately in love with life, gentlemen, to do that. I'm not so blind that I cannot see that you, my fellow citizens, have come to the end of your patience with my conversation, discussion. You found them too irksome, irritating. And now you're trying to get rid of them. Will any other people find them easier to put up with? That is most unlikely. A fine life I should have if I left this country at my age, and spent the rest of my days trying one city after another, only to be turned out time and time again.
But surely, Socrates, after you have left us, you can spend the rest of your life quietly minding your own business.
That is the hardest thing of all. And I tell you that this would be disobedience to the God, and that's why I cannot mind my own business. You wouldn't believe me. You would think I'm pulling your leg. If, on the other hand, I tell you that to let no day pass without discussing goodness and all the other subjects about which you hear me talking, and examining both myself and others, is really the very best thing that a man can do. And that life without this sort of examination is not worth living. You will be even less inclined to believe. Nevertheless, gentlemen, that is how it is. Besides, I'm not used to thinking of myself as deserving punishment. If I had money, I would suggest a fine. As it is, I cannot because I have none. Unless, of course, you like to fix the penalty at what I could pay. I suppose I could probably afford 100 drachmae. I suggest a fine for that amount. One moment, gentlemen. Plato and Crito and Critobulus and Polydorus want me to suggest 3,000 drachmae on their security. Very well. I accept this sum, and you can rely upon these gentlemen for its payment.
It will be to nobody's surprise that after this provocation, the jury's verdict, the death sentence, comes with an increased majority. The defendant has shown no remorse, no compromise. What we got instead were sarcasm, ridicule, and pride, and a stubborn insistence on continuing the subversive activities that had brought him in front of the people's court in the first place, and which, that must be clear to everyone now, can only have a negative effect on the morale and self-confidence of the citizenry, only just recovering from times of prolonged warfare and civic upheaval. The execution, though, will be in the most humane, unbloody manner known in the city, by a drink of poisonous hemlock. But before that, the defendant is allowed to address the assembly one more time. The last chance, perhaps, to come up with a gesture of civic humility.
Well, gentlemen, for the sake of a very small gain in time, you are going to earn the reputation and the blame from those who wish to speak ill about our city, that you have put Socrates, a wise man. Good little saying, I'm wise even for you. If you had waited just a little while, you would have had your way in the course of nature. You can see I'm well on in life, and near to death. I say this not to all of you, only to those who voted for my execution. And I have something else to say to them as well. No doubt you think, gentlemen, that I have been condemned for lack of the arguments which I could have used if I thought it right to leave nothing unsaid or undone to secure my acquittal. But that is far from the truth. It is not a lack of arguments that has led to my condemnation, but a lack of audacity and shamelessness, and my refusal to address you in the way which would have given you most pleasure. You would have liked to hear me weep and wail, doing and saying all sorts of things which I declare to be unworthy of myself, but which you are used to hearing from other people. In a court of law, just as in warfare, neither I nor anyone else ought to use his wits to escape death by any means. In a battle, it is often obvious that you could escape death by giving up your arms and throwing yourselves at the mercy of your pursuers. But I tell you, gentlemen, the problem is not really, the difficulty is not really to escape death. The real difficulty is to escape from corruption, which is far more fleet of foot. In this present instance, I, the slow old man, have been overtaken by the slow of the two. But my accusers, who are clever and quick, have been overtaken faster. But even when I leave this court, I shall go away condemned by you to death. But they will go away convicted by truth herself of badness and injustice. And they will accept their sentence even as I accept mine. No doubt it was meant to be so. And I think the result is enough. Having said so much, I feel moved to prophesy to those of you who voted against me, because I am now at that point where the gift of prophecy comes most readily to man, the point of death. I tell you, my executioners, that as soon as I am dead, vengeance will fall upon you with a punishment far more painful than your killing of me. You have brought about my death in the belief that through it you will be delivered from submitting the conduct of your lives to criticism. But I tell you, the result will be just the opposite. You will have more critics, whom until now I have restrained without your knowing it. And being younger, they will be harsher on you and will cause you more annoyance. If you expect to stop denunciation of your wrong way of life by putting people to death, there's something amiss with your reasoning. That way of escape is neither possible nor creditable. The best and easiest way is not to stop the mouths of others, but to make yourselves as well behaved as possible. That is my last message to those of you who voted for my condemnation. As for those of you who voted for my acquittal, I should very much like to say a few words to reconcile you with these results, as long as the officials are still busy and I am not yet on my way to the place where I must die. I look upon you as my friends, and I'd like to explain to you the meaning of what has happened to me. Gentlemen, I have had a remarkable experience. In the past, the prophetic voice that I have become accustomed to has always been my constant companion, opposing me even quite trivial things if I was going to take the wrong course. Now something has happened to me, you can see, that might be thought, and is commonly considered, to be a supreme calamity. But neither when I left home this morning, nor when I was taking my place here in the court, nor at any point in any part of my speech did the divine sign oppose me. In other discussions, it has often checked me in the middle of a sentence, but this time it has never opposed me in any part of this whole business, in anything that I have said or done. What do I think is the explanation? I will tell you. I think that this thing that has happened to me is a blessing. And we are quite mistaken thinking that death is an evil. Death is one of two things. Either it is annihilation, and the dead have no consciousness of anything, or it is, as we are told, really a change, a migration of the soul from this place to another. Now, if there is no consciousness, but only a dreamless sleep, death must be a marvelous thing. I suppose if any of you were asked to pick out the night in which he slept so soundly as not even to dream, and then were asked to say how many better and happier nights he has spent in the course of his life, well, I think even a great king himself would find these nights easy to count. If death is like this, I call it gay. Because the whole time could then be considered as being no more than one single night. If, on the other hand, death is a removal from here to some other place, and if what we are told is true, that all the dead are there, what greater blessing could there be, gentlemen of the jury? If on arrival in the other world one would meet there the true jurors who are said to preside in those courts, Minos and Radamantis and Aeacus and Triptolemus and all those other demigods who were upright in their earthly lives. Would that be an unrewarding place to settle? How much would any of you not give to meet Orpheus and Musaeus and his yacht and Homer? Oh, I at least would be willing to die 10 times over if that accounts for truth. And above all, to spend my time there as here, examining and searching people's minds to find out who really is wise among them and who only thinks he is. What would you not give, gentlemen, to be able to scrutinize the leader of that great army against Troy? Or Odysseus, or Sisyphus, and all the thousands of other men and women one could mention, their company and conversation, and a chance to examine them would be unimaginable happiness. At any rate, I presume that they do not put you to death for doing that. Because apart from the other happiness in which their place surpasses ours, they are now immortal for the rest of time. If what we are told is true. You two, gentlemen, must look forward to death with confidence. And fix your minds on that one belief that is certain, that nothing can harm a good man, either in life or after death. And his fortunes are not a matter of indifference to the gods. That present experience of mine does not arise from the earthly causes. I am quite clear that the time has come where it was better for me to die and be released of my distraction. That is why my sign never turned me back. For my part, I bear no grudge at all against those who condemned and accused me, although they didn't do it with this kind intention, but because they thought that they were hurting me. And for that, they deserve blame. However, I asked them to grant me one favor. Gentlemen, if my sons grow up and you think that they are putting money or anything else before goodness, take your revenge by plaguing them as I plagued you. And if they fancy themselves for no reason, you must scold them as I scolded you for neglecting the important things and thinking that they are something when they are good for nothing. If you do this, gentlemen, I will have had justice at your hands. I and my children. Well, now it is time to be off.
One, to die, and we to live. But which of us has the happier prospect of unknown forever?